So, Sean, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming. It's going to be fun. We're going to talk about your book, 40 Days of Being a Three,
Mhm.
which, of course, that means you're a three.
I
So,
am.
why don't you tell us, for possibly the novices to the Enneagram, tell us a little bit about the number three so they can have an idea what that means.
Yeah. So, for folks who are unfamiliar with the Enneagram, it's a personality typology. And there are nine numbers, and each number is distinct in some really critical ways. And it's the best teachers, I think, describe it as nine ways of seeing. And of course, it splinters down from there. We can talk about wings and subtypes and what we do in. But I'm a three on the Enneagram, which means very simply that I am one of those people who is driven by accomplishment and achievement. Threes tend to be self assured. Lots of folks say they're attractive, charming. Threes tend to be ambitious, competent. Threes find themselves oftentimes in leadership roles, even leadership roles that they may not be prepared for because they project so much confidence and competence to do things. But at the heart of being a three, because I think at the heart of all of our numbers isn't necessarily what we project into the world, but what we fear most. The greatest fear for Enneagram threes is the feeling of being worthless. And so, what that means is that we go out into the world with a deep desire to be valuable and worthwhile. Um, and sometimes what that also means is that we will take the image of being valuable and worthwhile and accomplished over the real thing. So the Enneagram performer, when you hear people go through the numbers. And so one of the things that we have to deal with a lot if you are an Enneagram 3 is our fear of failure and of being seen as a failure. We are in Enneagram language in the um, the shame triad or the feeling triad. And what that means is that we receive the world with feelings. So we feel what the room feels, what the person in front of us feels, but we are also feeling repressed as Enneagram threes, which means we don't use that information to make decisions or move ahead or process our own feelings. So a lot of people who are performers are threes. That doesn't mean that most performers are threes, but just a lot of them are. People like Taylor Swift. They can kind of read an audience and get a sense of what's going on in the room with an audience in front of them. We're always performing. And what that ability to read the audience comes from is our feeling dominance. We know what's going on in a room when we walk into the room, and we know what is expected of us in any given situation. And if you want to make a three really nervous and you want to make a three very self-critical, the best thing you can do is put them in a situation where the expectations are really unclear. That's when we tend to recoil and not know what to do and sometimes even shut down.
Yeah,
That's Enneagram
absolutely.
3.
That's a three. Yeah, everybody loves a three because you can read them and give them what they want. I know I've heard people say they're chameleons or can morph, and that's
Mhm.
really what you were explaining is they know what you need and they give it to you.
Yeah, yeah. And that's actually, a lot of the criticism that people get, that Enneagram threes get, is about that ability to shapeshift. But what you said, Michael, is so true that the motivation for most Enneagram threes in that move is to serve you, to serve the person in front of them, to give them what they want. But that constant giving of what the other person wants over the course of a lifetime becomes a disassociation with what the person themselves wants and what they feel.
You might even wonder what are those things because you've lost them from all of the shifting, right?
Absolutely, have no idea what you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
You can much more accurately tell what a conversation partner is feeling than what you're feeling until you've done some extensive work. And that won't make you not be a 3, right? So it's not something that's concretized in someone. You can actually do work to bring up feelings and to be more in touch with your feelings and to own your feelings, which is actually what I have set out as my goal over the last 3 or 4 years, is to be in touch with my own feelings and what I want. And when 3s get into that space, the first person they shock is themselves, that their feelings actually do matter and that you can. And this is like Michael, a realization that I've had just in the last like 6 months, that I can make a decision based predominantly or even solely on how I feel.
Mm,
And that's okay. Now, obviously, you
absolutely.
don't want to do anything that's destructive. You don't want to do anything that's sinful, that's harmful to other people. But I can say, oh, I'm going to do this today, not because it's the most productive thing or it's going to move the ball down the field a little bit, because, oh, that's what I feel like doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so let's take this a step further. It's always interesting to hear how people lived out their journey to figure out their number. I mean, some people, it's as simple as they went to a Enneagram class. They told them in 30 minutes you're up, and they're like, oh, I always wanted to know that. And others, it's you take one of those tests, which I took the test 4 times and came out 3 different numbers. And others, it's reading and trying to talk with close friends and relatives to see, hey, that sounds a lot like you. And then once you realize, gosh, this is the one I hate the most, you realize that's you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey of being a 3 to get into a 3?
Yeah. Well, you'll have to repeat like the last little part of that. I lost you for just a second.
Oh, sure. No, I
You
was just
said
saying.
you took a test 3 times and came out 3 different numbers.
Yeah,
Um,
and I was saying, then some people, they read the books and study with each other, and then when they find the one that they like the least, that's usually who they are.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. So aggressive numbers, 3s, 7s, and 8s. Anecdotally, I don't think there's any research to back this up, tend to like their number more than the other numbers. And the kind of ouch you feel when you hear your number is that that kind of truthful, like, oh, that's true, but I wouldn't want to be different. And so like when I first heard, I had the greatest introduction to the Enneagram, and I have a future book coming out January of 2022 where I tell this story. Is that a short story is I was invited to a retreat in Connecticut years ago. And it was a retreat with Suzanne Stabile and Ian Cron. And the first day of it, Suzanne just taught what is typically like her Know Your Number workshop. And when they got to the Enneagram 3, like I could just look at everything that I had done that morning before we got in that place, like, and know that I knew that I was a 3, like right off the bat. So all of those things that just driven by accomplishment and productivity, highly competitive. I don't know how many times like I had gone over my outfit that I was going to wear that morning. So when I heard it, it wasn't a shock to me. And it actually came as much of a relief that like there wasn't something defective or wrong, but also that there had been millions of other people before me who had walked this path, and that there was a way to both embrace who I was, but also grow. I think that's one of the beautiful things about the Enneagram is it doesn't leave you stuck and just say, well, this is what you are. And so now, go have lunch or go get coffee. It says, this is how you have attempted over the course of your life to be whole and to be loved. And there are pathways to leverage what's so great about you, but also to bring up the things that you struggle with and give you tools to become more human and whole. And so I heard that weekend. I had heard about it before, years before. My friend Brian McLaren had mentioned something to me about someone who was an Enneagram 8. I didn't know what that was. We were sitting at dinner.
Mhm.
He and the third friend, we were all sitting together, and he was describing somebody who was an 8, and it wasn't in any pejorative sense. He didn't call anybody a bad name. It wasn't negative at all. But I left that meeting thinking, I don't know what an Enneagram 8 is, but I don't want to be one of those. And that was my whole introduction to the Enneagram before. And so I came back from that retreat and I bought Richard Rohr's book, The Enneagram and Christian Perspective. And like a lot of people who do what I do for a living, I already had a stack of books that I was trying to make my way through, and it went to the bottom of the stack. About 6 or 8 months after that, my oldest daughter picked it up and read through the entire book. She's pretty precocious. She's a fabulous reader. And she came and she said, I think that I'm a 1 on the Enneagram. And I said, well, I need to really dig more into this because as every parent knows, like when you have a kid who's into something, like you really want to get into whatever they're into, right? And then just a journey over the last 8 or 9 years, really, for me, of learning about the Enneagram, about who I am, about how to healthily deal with myself, my family, and others.
Yeah, it's great for that as well. So is your daughter a perfectionist then, or?
She's 17 now, and so I think she read that. I mean, obviously she was a preteen when she read the first time. She still has a copy of that book that she goes back through, and she might be. I'm always reluctant to type kids, and I've seen some things in her during our COVID quarantine time that are atypical of 1s, but I'm also being very mindful of the fact that we are in COVID and nobody I know is doing their best right now. And so I think she is. If she were to be asked, that's what she would say. And we do see a lot of, we try not to say of anyone besides ourselves anything about our number, but we'll say like we see a lot of 1 energy or a lot of 7 energy, or a lot of 9 energy, because one of my missions in the Enneagram world is for us all to get beyond the idea that we are our number, because we're not. Like I'm Sean, you're Michael, my wife is Rochelle, and the Enneagram really gives helpful language and explanation, but that explanation is never an excuse. So I'm not a 3. It's a good shorthand for people who know the Enneagram to say, oh yeah, well, Sean, he's a 3 on the Enneagram. But no, Sean is Sean. And I have a lot of 3 energy, and I do things that are very stereotypical of an Enneagram 3. But I do want us, especially considering other people, to move beyond that sort of calcified categorization of people.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm completely with you because I'm a 4, and we fear not being an individual. You know, we fight. No, I'm not a 4 because you can't define me. Well, that's the definition of a 4. So, but that's what I like about the Enneagram too. And people get caught up into, the specific numbers. You're in your place when you're healthy. You're in a different place when you're dark. You might have a wing that you could be a 3 with a 2 wing or a 4 wing, and it's not something that locks you in like a lot of the personality inventories that they give you at work, where you're this color. Now that's what color you are, and you're like, I don't want to be a color.
Yeah, because you're never like healthy in your color or healthy in your Myers-Briggs number, or unhealthy. And I was having this conversation with Jonathan Merritt, who a lot of your listeners might know from the Christian publishing world. And he also identifies as a 3. And we were talking about health and unhealth. And I told him, like, there are times where I would never say I'm healthy in my number right now or unhealthy, like as a general. I have healthy moments and unhealthy moments. So there are times where I'm immensely competitive with someone that I shouldn't be competitive with at all. And I feel that competition for sometimes 15 minutes and sometimes for 15 days. And that's unhealthy when I'm thinking about it. But I might be in a very healthy space in my number in terms of dealing with my wife or at work or with our children. And you're getting the very best of what I bring to the world as an Enneagram 3 in those moments. And those could be on the same days, right? So I'm never completely in one camp. I think people can be toxic I think toxic people, and when you're toxic in your number, you're toxic all the time. Like there's just nothing you can do about it. But those other things are so fluid. It's minute to minute. There are times where you're in deep stress. That would also be a caveat, because I've known some folks who thought they were one number for years. I had a friend who's a 5 who for years thought that he was a different number. And when he changed jobs, he realized, oh no, like I was just in stress the whole time that I was at that job. That's why I thought what I thought. So I think it's a fabulous system, Michael, to help us explain ourselves to ourselves and help to explain ourselves to others. But at the end of the day, for me, it's a language to understand something real, which is our own inner worlds and our inner connectivity. Like that's the real thing. The Enneagram helps us explain the real thing.
That's kind of where I'm going with my next question. So thanks for prompting me for the segue. Now that you understand your number, and it's not you, but it is a part of describing you, how do you think that's helped you in your spiritual walk?
Well, it's given me places to go. Well, the first thing that it did is explain to me why some spiritual practices came very easily to me and some I absolutely hated. Because when I understand that I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, I am I am feeling dominant, I am feeling repressed, I am in an aggressive stance, I am a 3 4. Sean Palmer is a self-preservation 3 with a 4 wing, and that means some things. So it explained like, oh, I really do want to be accomplished and well known. Like that's a driver in me to do things. But at the same time, I don't want to pursue being well known. And I want to cling to my individuality and my uniqueness, because this is like my 4 wing coming into play. And so I was like, journaling doesn't come easily to me. It takes too long. I have to go into feelings and I'm repressed in feelings. That might be something I really need to do because it's really hard. Bible study, preaching, because and most of my life is spent in behind a microphone talking to people in some that comes super easy to me. And that means, that's my gift to give, and I can give it much more freely. And so just in forming spiritual practices and which ones I choose. I write in the book about taking Mondays off and doing contemplative prayer because it forces me to slow down and be still. In the last 10 months, I've practiced a weekly Sabbath where I don't do anything. And I talk about in the book that Sabbath is both rest from work and rest from working on ourselves. And so I don't exercise on Sabbath days. I don't worry about what I'm eating on Sabbath days. I don't do work for my job or writing or anything else. And all of those are gifts of the Enneagram to me, because it pointed me in the direction of this is what you need to work on because of the way you are wired. And so I moved out of that grab bag spirituality where, oh man, it looks like this person at church who really seems to know God, they read through the Bible every year. Well, that may not be a good practice for some people. Silence may not be a great practice for some people. And that both means that there are times where you should do it and there are times that mean you shouldn't do it. So giving me some handles on all of that is one, but it also helped me spiritually by understanding better what the people around me needed in terms of their own spiritual walk and practice. And that's not just limited to my family, but people that I pastor alongside of and pastor as part of our congregation.
You kind of started sliding into what I was going to have you talk about next, which is your book, 40 Days of Being a Two. How do you think that that will help others in their journey? I'm sorry, a three, not
No.
a two. We're not
Well,
talking about no stinking two right now. We don't need a helper. So,
well, Hunter's book, 40 Days of Being a Two, is really great. Um, so 40 Days on Being a Three, it was fascinating. So when I got back the first round of revisions, and I have an incredible editor at IVP, Cindy Bunch. She's incredibly kind and working with all of us in COVID, where we're all in stress and the whole world is upside down. And I told her at the end of this, she needs to write an Enneagram book about having to walk through all of the Enneagram numbers at the same time, kind of doing a very similar project. But I wrote about the feedback I got was like, a lot of these are about failure. And I thought, well, yeah, a lot of them are about failure, because that is so prominent in the life of a three. And there's a lot about feeling and about trying to address and spend some time in your feelings. I had a congregant maybe about 15 years ago when we had a church member just in the middle of a lot of deep grief and pain. And as I was talking with her about this third congregant, she said to me, she goes, the reality is, Sean, that there are some kinds of pain that you just have to sit in. And that's the way that things like failure and emotion, lots of feeling, the thing that threes are trying to avoid is sitting in the pain, sitting in feeling. And so what I was trying to do with the book is to create space for Enneagram threes to deal with the thing that they don't want to deal with. And I knew a couple of things were going to happen. That a lot of threes were going to have this book bought for them and given to them by family members. Because they're just kind of too fast. We're too fast moving. We're not reflective enough, often enough, that was going to be part of it. And two, that most of them wouldn't finish it. And that most of them, if they did finish it, would blitz through and just read all 40 entries like in a day or two, which is the feedback that I've gotten from people who have read the book, that I sat down and read the whole thing in one sitting. Either that, or people that have written, it's like, I force myself, because I wrote about this in the preface of the book. They said, I force myself to only read one entry per day. I mean, they're only like 500 to 800 word entries. So they're very manageable. And so what I hope it does is that very thing, that threes, and it's not just for threes. And that's the great thing about this, is that if you are a two or a four, because a three is one of your wings, like that's really helpful for you to explore what that is, because you're drawing energy from that all the time. If you are 6 or 9, the other two anchor points on the Enneagram, you are moving. And I think it's an Naranjo that says that those anchor points, 6, 9, and 3, are constantly moving and interchanging with each other. So in that inner triangle of the Enneagram, that there's the most movement. So if you're a 6 or a 9, 40 Days on Being a 3 is an incredible place for you to begin to understand and deepen and broaden your understanding of yourself. So any of those 5 numbers, what I want all of them to get is to come to grips with this central fact. Much of what you're doing is unnecessary because you are already loved.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good point. I'm with you too. And it's not a plug for IVP, but I think that as all 9 of these come out over the course of the year, that people should get all of them, because you're dealing with your children, with your brothers and sisters, with people at church. as you get to know all those numbers, I mean, maybe you don't want to be assigning numbers to people, but as you get to, you can recognize qualities, and I think it just makes you a better communicator and more understanding with people when you understand where their fears are and where their strengths are, and they can work with each other.
And absolutely, like on our church staff, just to amplify your point, Michael, on our church staff, we are very Enneagram conversant. And so everybody knows their number. And if you are a manager, like we really encourage folks to know the people who work under you, what their numbers are, and how they see the world. And it's just incredibly important. I mentioned this only because I was working on it earlier today, but my next book with IVP is about communication, about public speaking in light of Enneagram numbers. And it's the hardest thing that I've ever done, but I don't know how it's going to turn out. But just to put that on the table, and I know that there are others who are working in really specific areas, like if you're a spiritual director, what it means for you to have a great understanding of the Enneagram. If you work with children, if you are a school teacher, a Bible class teacher, a family ministries director, it's all terribly important because this is how we show up in the world. And to be able not to weaponize that against other people, but to open up space inside yourself to receive others for who they are, where they are at any given time is an incredible gift that we can give one another.
Absolutely. You'll have to come back whenever you get that finished. I'm assuming that's going to be, sometime next year then by the time it's published, or?
I think it's slated for January 22. So
perfect. Yeah, we'll have to get you back on so you can talk about it. When you brought up 3 and people buying them the book and them rushing through it or not reading all of it, now you got me feeling bad for whenever they have the author for 8. They're probably going to go, you read it to me or I don't have time for this.
A wonderful woman, Sandra, is doing the book on 8s, and I can imagine, and I'm so glad there's a female doing the book on 8s, but like stereotypically, I just see a lot of Enneagram 8s like opening the book and going like, "That's right." So it was so funny because they're being released in stages, and 40 Days on Being a 2 came out, and 40 Days of Being a 3, mine and Hunter's books came out on the same day, and people were asking about their number and like, when's 6 coming out? When's 1 coming out? When's 5 coming out? And all of that. And everyone else was just curious about when their books would come out. But Enneagram 8s were mad that theirs weren't.
Oh, there you go. Exactly.
Like, like I was like, oh, like everybody else is kind of like, but you're legitimately upset that you're having to wait.
Well, they're the important one, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Or at least they think so.
But I guess we shouldn't pick on the 8. There's not one here to defend themselves. So they're all the numbers are great. They have their strengths and weaknesses.
Oh, the Enneagram 8 stopped listening when it wasn't about them. So that's a joke. Exactly. They could say the same about 3s and it wouldn't be inaccurate.
Yeah. All right. Well, once again, thank you for talking and sharing with us about your book and your journey. And, just thanks for writing the book.
Well, I loved writing it, being part of the process. I'm grateful for IVP. They've done such an incredible and beautiful job, both with the individual books, but with the team that they've assembled. And so we are excited to get it in people's hands, not because this is some great money-making endeavor and all of that, but we think this is a really great way for people to begin to deepen themselves and explore themselves. You can be new to the Enneagram or have known it for a very, very long time. And I think all of these books will be really helpful to you. So I'm proud to be a part of it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.